we say in chat? Just got done hooping. Some very good runs today. We did two 50-point games, which was kind of crazy, something I've never done before. Unfortunately, we lost both games. I didn't put up too many shots, but felt like I contributed a little bit. Then we did a 3-on-3. Let's just say your boy was putting in some work. I'm starting to realize that I'm feeling a lot more confident when I'm shooting when it's a 3v3 or a 4v4 and also half court for some reason. But nonetheless, let's get into it. We're going on to part 2 now, which is default to truth. Let's get it. And it is chapter 3. The Queen of Cuba. Number 1. Let's take a look at another Cuban spy story. In the early 1990s, thousands of Cubans began to flee the regime of Fidel Castro. They coal-boated together crude boats made of inner tubes and metal drums and wooden doors and any number of other stray parts, and set out in a desperate voyage across the 90 miles of the Florida Straits to the United States. By one estimate, as many as 24,000 people died attempting the journey. It was a human rights disaster. In response, a group of Cuban emergees in Miami founded Hermanos al Rescate, Brothers to the Rescue. Hermanos al Rescate, Brothers to the Rescue. They put together a makeshift air force of single-engine Canisius sky makers and took to the skies over the Florida Straits, searching for refugees from the air and radioing their coordinates to the Coast Guard. Hermanos al Rescate saved thousands of lives. They became heroes. As time passed, the emergees grew more ambitious. They began flying into Cuban airspace, dropping leaflets on Havana urging the Cuban people to rise up against Castro's regime. The Cuban government, already embarrassed by the flight of refugees, was outraged. Tensions rose, coming to a head on February 24th, 1996. That afternoon, three Hermanos al Rescate planes took off for the Florida Straits. As they neared the Cuban coastline, two Cuban Air Force MiG fighters jets shot two of the planes out of the sky, killing all 4 people aboard. The response to the attacks was immediate. The United Nations Security Council passed a resolution denouncing the Cuban government. A grave President Clinton held a press conference. The Cuban emergent population in Miami was furious. The 2 planes had been shot down in international airspace, making the incident tantamount to an act of war. The radio chatter among the Cuban pilots was released to the press. We hit them. Cojones. We hit them. We retired them. Cojones. We hit them. Fuckers. Mark the place where we retired them. This one won't fuck with us anymore. And then after one of the MiGs zeroed in on the second casena, homeland or death, you bastards. But in the midst of the controversy, the story suddenly shifted. A retired U.S. Rear Admiral named Eugene Carroll gave an interview to CNN. Carroll was an influential figure inside Washington. He had firmly served as the director of all U.S. armed forces in Europe with 7,000 weapons at his disposal. Just before the Hermanos al Rescue shot down, Carroll said he and a small group of military analysts had met with top Cuban officials. CNN. Admiral, can you tell us what happened on your trip to Cuba, who you spoke with, and what you were told? Carl. We were hosted by the Ministry of Defense, General Rosel del Toro, who traveled around, inspected Cuban bases, Cuban schools, their partially completed nuclear power plant, and so on. In longer discussions with General Rosales del Toro and his staff, the question came up about these overflights from U.S. aircraft, not government aircraft, but private airplanes operating out of Miami. They asked us what would happen if we shot one of these down. We can, Carroll interrupted that question from his Cuban host as a thinly veiled warning. The interview continued. CNN, so what you returned, what did you relay this information to? Carroll, as soon as we could make appointments, we discussed the situation with members of the State Department and members of the Defense Intelligence Agency. The Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, is the third arm of the Foreign Intelligence Triumvirate in the U.S. government, along with the CIA and the National Security Agency. If Carroll had met with the State Department and the DIA, he had delivered the Cuban warning about as high in the American government as you could go. And did the State Department and DIA take those warnings to heart? Did they step in and stop hermanos Arresquet from continuing their reckless forays into Cuban airspace? Absolutely not. Carroll's comments ricocheted around Washington, D.C. policy circles. This was an embarrassing revelation. The Cuban shoot down happened on September 24th. Carroll's warning to the State Department and DIA were delivered on February 23rd. A proponent Washington insider met with U.S. officials the day before the crisis, explicitly warned them that the Cubans had lost patience with hermanos Arresquet, and his warning was ignored. What began as a Cuban artresy was now transformed into a story about American diplomatic incompetence. CNN. But what about the position that these were unarmed civilian planes? Carroll repeated what he had been told in Havana. Carroll, this is a very sensitive question. Where were they? What were they doing? I'll give you an analogy. Suppose we had the planes flying over San Diego from Mexico, dropping leaflets and inciting against California government Wilson. How long would we tolerate these overflights after we had warned them against it? Fidel Castro wasn't being invited onto CNN to defend himself, but he didn't need to be. He had a near admiral making his case. I'll take a pause there. I'm gonna end the night a little quick today. I'm gonna wake up tomorrow to go play some golf. A bit tired, so I want to get some rest. But we're gonna continue on this story. I'm gonna imagine that this is another example of what it takes to trust people, even within your own, department, or in this case, sending a message to the important decision makers, and seeing how sometimes when you confront something with with a lot of urgency and importance, others may not receive that information or made the decision that you are willing to make, which is very fascinating. So we'll continue on. I will see if there's more to the story, but yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace. Tomorrow should be a longer one as well.